Pnawn da a croeso. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for the second webinar as part of the Cydrannu Knowledge Knowledge Sharing webinar series. Always need to get those words put out properly. My name is Victoria Ford and I'm part of the delivery team for Cyd, the Space for Procurement and Commercial Professionals in Wales. I'm going to be facilitating this afternoon's sessions, and for those of you new to our Cydrannu series, I'll explain a little bit more about the format and how things are going to work. Then in a moment I'll introduce the session and our speakers for today. We're going to be recording today's session. You may have noticed that as you joined. That's so we can share it on our website and allow as many people as possible to access the content. That's really core to us, to what we're doing, to be able to spread knowledge and information as widely as possible. So firstly, we'll be hearing from our guest speakers, then there'll be time for questions. Please feel free to add any questions you have to the Q&A section at any time, and we can pick them up from there, and you'll see that at the bottom of your screen. We do want it to be as interactive as possible, so please do put your questions in the Q&A box as they come to you, and we can pick them up then at the end when we do the Q&A session. Also, please feel free to use the chat function for any thoughts or comments you may have, but also to introduce yourselves to each other, because it's always nice to say hello. If you have any technical issues or questions, then my colleague Chris is supporting the session today and he'll do his best to help you. You can message Chris directly in the chat and he'll be keeping an eye on the chat and the Q&A functions. He's actually logged out under the Parago Zoom account, so you'll see him as Parago when you look for people to message if you do need to get in touch with him. Before I introduce today's session, I'd like to ask my colleague Angharad, who's here today, to say a few words about the Welsh language support available for today's session. So Angharad, if I could pass over to you, please.
Pnawn da, a croeso mawr I chi I ail sesiwn Cydrannu, sef y gyfres rhannu gwybodaeth. Heddiw da ni'n mynd yn trafod Caffael Gwyrdd, da ni'n falch iawn o gael Olga Grant o Llywodraeth Iwerddon hefo ni a Jenny Lloyd o Olga. Mae'n groeso mawr I chi ofyn cwestiynau trwy gyrru'n Gymraeg, a mi allai gyfieithu, a mae Jenny sy'n ar y panel yn gwneud cyflwyniad yn siarad Cymraeg hefyd, felly croeso chi ofyn cwestiwn Gymraeg neu Saesneg I Jenny. Felly, mwynhewch y sesiwn a nôl drosodd at ti, Victoria.
Diolch Angharad. So Cydrannu is the name of the knowledge sharing series for procurement and commercial professionals in Wales. In Welsh, it means sharing together, and it's core to what Cyd is all about. And recording today's session means we can make it available on our website to share the content as widely as possible. And please do pass that link on once we've shared it later on this week. The focus of today's session is green procurement. We're very grateful to be joined by Olga Grant from the Government of Ireland. Olga is from the Office of Government Procurement, and she's going to be talking to us about the Government of Ireland's Green Public Procurement. I know Olga's going to be sharing her slides today, so Olga, if you want to take control of the screen now, we can get started in a moment. We'll then be hearing from Jenny Lloyd from the Welsh Local Government Association, who'll be talking about the WLGA's Green Procurement Toolkit. There'll be time for questions at the end, so as I said, please do drop any questions you have into the Q&A and I'll be happy to ask those for you. So let's get us started. I'll hand over to you then, Olga. Croeso.
Thank you. Thanks very much to the organisers for inviting me here today. It's great to participate in this. So yes, I am Olga Grant. I work in the policy unit in the Office of Government Procurement in Ireland. And I'm going to talk about the work of the Office of Government Procurement, or OGP, in facilitating green public procurement in Ireland. So I'm going to start with explaining the policy drivers for green public procurement in Ireland. Ireland's National Action Plan on Green Public Procurement was published way back in 2012. A lot's happened, of course, since 2012 in the areas of climate and the circular economy, nationally, in the European Union and internationally. So at this stage, green public procurement is mentioned in various different policies, but it is a little fragmented. So happily, in 2021, the government approved a decision that the Department of the Environment, Climate and Communications, DEC, would take the lead on developing a new green public procurement strategy and action plan. And they are leading on this, and this is this development is well underway with the intention of publishing a new strategy this year. So I think this is a very welcome development, bringing the different aspects of green public together in one place. So one of the key changes in Ireland since 2012, since that original GPP action plan was published, was the publication of our first climate action plan. We now update that annually, but the first one I guess led to a lot of changes. And naturally, it covers climate action, adaptation and mitigation across the whole of society and the economy. And there are many actions, and one of them related to green public procurement. So in response to that action, the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, which is the parent department for my office, the Office of Government Procurement, published a circular on promoting the use of environmental and social considerations in public procurement. And this led to asking government departments to consider using green criteria in the public procurement process, and also directing government departments to incorporate relevant green procurement measures into their planning and their reporting cycles. Anyway, that was a major development. I'm going to talk about some different ways of the OGP specifically as facilitating green public procurement. So firstly, I'm in the policy unit, but we are also our central purchasing body for Ireland. So my colleagues in OGP sourcing have been working hard at meaning different central purchasing arrangements that different public bodies can then draw down from. So some examples include that I mentioned their green criteria, and include that, sorry, I think I missed a slide. Anyway, I'll stick with that for the moment. Include that our arrangement for office paper includes all the Irish green criteria, and also it includes recycled options. Also, we have central purchasing arrangements for electric cars and vans. Waste management services include paying by weight, which should encourage reduction of waste, waste separation, compostable bin liners, client education and training, and the use of electric or compressed natural gas fleets. Our compute and storage arrangements include require third-party certifications of Energy Star or equivalent, and membership of REPAC, which is Ireland's organisation for dealing with packaging waste. So I'm going to go back there. So I mentioned there about government departments needing to consider including green criteria in the public procurement process. So there was a need then for well-defined, verifiable green criteria. And the Environmental Protection Agency published new guidance on green public procurement, updating earlier guidance in 2021. And along with that, they published sets of such green criteria for 10 different sectors. So this, again, was an important development. So back to the OGP. So another way that we're trying to facilitate green public procurement is by facilitating engagement between policy departments who want to see procurement used to address the circular economy or climate action or pollution or biodiversity, whatever it might be, and the central purchasing bodies such as the OGP, but also our partners in defence and the health service and local government and education. We chair, OGP policy chairs, a group that brings these different organisations, public bodies together. And then in 2021, we, along with the Department of the Environment, Climate and Communication, set up a subgroup specifically on environmental considerations. And I think we've had a lot of progress through this. For example, we have worked on how to improve training in green public procurement, and how to improve reporting and so on. So it's been useful. Something else that we do again in the OGP is that we engage a lot with procurement practitioners. So this could be at presentations and engagement at the Procurement Officer Network, which is largely clients of OGP sourcing. These are well-attended meetings, so these are great for getting the message out about green public procurement. The OGP held a conference on green public procurement in 2020. Last year, which included examples of best practice from different types of public body across Ireland. And we have developed some quite simple web pages that not particularly sophisticated, but hopefully these are a good one-stop shop for public procurement practitioners to go to get information across a sustainable public procurement, including green. And then, there are links so that they can go and get more information about particular aspects as they so wish. And that includes news, new updates in relation to green public procurement and socially responsible procurement as well. So I mentioned earlier that the EPA published green criteria that can be used in procurement documents to green procurement processes. And these are published in the form of PDF documents, and they are really excellent resources, but they are sometimes quite difficult to, there's a lot of scrolling through, and this can be, and it can be a bit confusing what you need to use. This is not unusual. These are based on European Union criteria sets, and this is the standard way that they have been adapted in different member states. But we thought, busy procurement practitioners, maybe don't have the time to go through these or might get lost. So to facilitate their use, we in the OGP collaborated with the Environmental Protection Agency that published them and the Department of the Environment, Climate and Communications, and set about trying to find a way to make it easier to get to find the right criteria for specific procurement processes. So we got funding from the Public Service Innovation Fund in Ireland, and that was backed up then by the OGP, and we developed an online tool called GPP Criteria Search. So some background just to show, there's quite a lot of data within this. There are 836 different options, which are 731 distinct criteria, and I'll get to the link so that you can have a look. A minority of these, I suppose, have two different versions, which mostly relate to different levels of environmental ambition. So we have core, and then we have comprehensive in those cases. And the comprehensive does result in better environmental outcomes, but it can be trickier to use, and maybe in relation to verification or a cost impact. But the bulk have only one version, so there you don't have to make any decision which version to use. And of those, the vast majority are appropriate, whatever level of environmental ambition you're aiming at. Some, though, are comprehensive, so that would be great to use where possible, but there might be times where it's more difficult. And then how do you get your information from that? Well, we have 264 different search terms or keywords. You can type in any of those and you get the criteria relevant to your search. Alternatively, you can use one of the 43 different subsectors, which are grouped in those 10 sectors that I showed earlier. So you don't need to know that to actually use it. That's just to give you an idea of what's behind this. So just very briefly, it's GPP criteria search. You can find it at gppcriteria.gov.ie. And so we suggest to public procurement practitioners in Ireland to have a look at the how to use first, because it gives you some information such as about those different levels of environmental ambition. And once you've done that, and when you come back to it and you've already read that, you can go straight to the search and you can type in whatever it is that you want to procure, so laptops in that example. Or alternatively, you can use the drop-down arrows under the 10 sectors. So for example, energy-related products includes criteria related to air conditioners or TVs, and so catering, food and catering has food, and beverages and it has catering. So let's imagine now that we want to procure printing services. So we type that in, we search, click search, you get there are 13 criteria relevant to printing services, you see them all. So initially you see, the headlines, I suppose, what it is, environmental technical capacity. But the drop-down arrows then give you more information, including the text that you would actually use in your procurement documents. And when you've spent some time reading those and deciding what it is that you do want to include, you can select there, click on the select, the ones you want. So in this imaginary situation, we've selected 3, and then we can check, did we select what we actually wanted? Yes, we did. and then we can download either as a Word document or PDF document. So this, we hope, is very useful for having the record, but also being able to copy and paste straight into procurement documents from this. So this tool was launched by our Minister Smith, Minister for Public Procurement and Circular Economy and e-government, in November 2022 at a large procurement conference. And in the 5 months since that, it's had over 8,600 visits. Now, not everybody who visits then, actually does a search, but a reasonable number of them do, and get to the next page with the different criteria. And then, some of those then actually do select, and a smaller number then move on to the review stage, and an even smaller number actually download the criteria, which initially might look a little disappointing. But we, in the same 5-month period, there were over 800 tenders on our e-tenders, our platform. So actually it was 357 downloads. Given that some of those tenders will not relate at all to the criteria sets, 357 downloads is perhaps not bad. So perhaps people are using this for where they're procuring in those sectors. It would be great to know. So the EPA, both the EPA and ourselves and OGP in our surveys are including questions now to try to find out, are people using this when they're procuring in these areas. So that's where we're at the moment, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Olga, for that. And it's really interesting to see what's happening over there in Ireland and in relation to some of the work that we're doing in Ceed, and colleagues on this call will be looking at as well in their own organisations and departments. I know that Chris is going to share back the slide pack now, so we can hand over to Jenny. Jenny, are you all good to go? Oh, there she is, lovely. I'll hand over to you. Thanks so much, Jenny.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks so much. And thanks, Olga, as well. That was really, really interesting. So hi, everybody. I'm Jenny from the Welsh Local Government Association, and I'm the coordinator for the Transition and Recovery Support Programme. Can you go to the next slide, please? So, and another one again, please. So I thought I'd give a little bit of an introduction to the support programme, so you can see kind of where we've come from and where the toolkit and the report sort of stemmed from. And so I can see a couple of familiar names on the list, so sorry if you've heard this before, but I'm going to go through it again. So the Transition and Recovery Support Programme is Welsh Government funded project to help Welsh local authorities to deliver on their climate action plans and to meet the commitment that were outlined in Net Zero Wales Carbon Budget 2. So when we were looking at developing the support of what councils would need to deliver on these actions and meet these commitments, we undertook a series of deep dives with our climate strategy panel in Wales. We commissioned a review of decarbonisation action planning within local authorities, mixing in with the Net Zero Wales commitments and speaking to our Always Climate Change Officers group. And from that, then we developed 4 support programmes that we're running with councils, which are leadership and behaviour change, land use and carbon sequestration. We've got one on transport and movement, and then sustainable procurement, which is the one that I'm here to talk about today. And just a note to say that our work covers decarbonisation and adaptation as well. Could you go on to the next slide, please? So I thought I would just give a little bit of an overview of what those commitments were. So when we were looking at what it was we were trying to achieve. So we were trying to achieve a good understanding of procured goods and services and the emissions profile of those within Welsh councils. So that we would set out carbon reduction specifications in all new and reviewed contracts to accelerate the decarbonisation agenda, and that we would focus on a number of impact contracts to share the learning. So these were the 3 commitments relating to procurement in Carbon Budget 2 for local authorities. So can I have the next slide, please? So what we set out to do was to create a toolkit, was to sort of get a picture on the lay of the land on where councils were with sustainable procurement and recording of their Scope 3 emissions. And to provide some guidance on that element of requirements that we could put into specification. So we wanted to create a toolkit, not creating any new guidance, but to bring what we found was that when we were speaking to officers, that there was just so much stuff already out there that maybe they weren't aware of, or they would have to dig through lots of things to find it. And what we wanted to do was bring that all together into one sort of easy to use toolkit, which could be downloaded. They could have their own thresholds to it, and they could sort of filter through on it. So I'll talk a little bit more about that toolkit later. We also wanted to come up with some set recommendations for actions that local authorities could undertake, but also actions for WLGA and Welsh Government and how we can improve sustainable procurement and the calculation and reporting of Scope 3 emissions relating to our purchasing. And we wanted to provide some training for sustainable procurement as well, that focus not just on procurement officers, but anybody that would be involved within tender exercises. So people that might be involved in early purchasing decisions, specification writing, commissioners, and contract managers. So can I have the next slide, please? So some of the key recommendations for the report, just to give you an idea, which is it's on our website, it's published for people to have a look at. But I thought I'd just run through sort of a few of those recommendations that are things that we are working on at the moment. So around data collection and reporting. So these are kind of recommendations that have come out for ourselves in WLGA, for Welsh Government, and for local authorities. So one of those recommendations is to provide like a standardized classification system to enable data to be captured at a minimum contract level, working towards item level data collection at the time. So at the moment, the majority of our emissions reporting on Scope 3 and our procurement decisions is done on a spend-based proxy. So we need to find ways to be able to sort of delve into the detail and get more emissions data from our suppliers over time, so that our reporting can be more sophisticated and more based on our actual the actual emissions arising from the goods and services that we procure. That we include those reporting structures into existing tools and any technology and development as well. So looking for opportunities to perhaps build it into SALTA Wales or e-tender Wales, and where we refer to sort of existing tools there's the public sector emissions reporting tool that councils fill in every year. So making sure that all of those are kind of joined up and aligned from the tools that we use for procurement to our reporting on emissions. But we carry on going with our sort of open dialogue between Welsh Government and the WLGA, and looking at the possibility of using an interim solution through consistent SIC code translation. So at the moment, what we found when we were undertaking this report was that when it comes to emissions reporting around procurement, councils were manually mapping their pro-class codes to the SIC code. So SIC codes are what are included within the public sector emissions reporting. So we're looking for a way to kind of streamline that to make it a little bit easier then for local authorities when it comes to that emissions reporting. So that one is around sort of our data collection. And then on the next slide, what we've got is some recommendations for councils, which relate to both data collection, but also then driving forward sustainable and green procurement. So a recommendation for a strong and consistent signal to suppliers. And I'll just jump down to the fourth point there around the adoption of WPPN 0621. So in case you're not familiar, that's the Welsh Procurement Policy Notice, which requires us to ask for carbon reduction plans on contracts over the value of £5 million. So one of the recommendations in our report, and in our toolkit, is that we start to roll that out to smaller sized contracts. So So we're asking that from contracts under the value of £5 million, as part of that, sending that strong, consistent message to the private sector, and giving that message that we want to work with people that are on the same journey as us in reaching net zero by 2030. They've established a solid and common foundation for data collection going forwards, that we continue our engagement with new and existing contracts, that we're looking at opportunities for embedding carbon reduction specification in there, and that we look at introducing a requirement for validation and verification for CRPs over the time leading up to 2030 as well. And then can I have the next slide, please? So when we were developing the toolkit, as I mentioned, what we were looking to do is bring together existing guidance around sustainable procurement. So not to create anything new, but just to kind of make it a little bit easier for councils when they were looking for criteria, they were looking for information, that they could find it all in one place. So these are just a few kind of places that we looked at when we were searching for that information to include within the toolkit. And can I have the next slide, please? And this is a screenshot. So unfortunately, we haven't got anything as fancy as the website that Olga ran through earlier. We have produced it in a downloadable Excel format. Whereas you can see you've got a list of different criteria and different sectors, and the sources of that that information and that guidance as well. You can't see it on this because I've just included a screenshot, but if you click on each of those pieces of tender specification, and it's got the recommended wording similar to Olga's, which you can copy and paste and put into your tender specification, or drop into an evaluation question, or put in as a KPI as well. You can also use like a search function based on threshold. So if you put in the value of the contract, it will come up with the guidance that's relevant to that size of contract. So that's about this rollout of using carbon reduction plans in smaller size contracts. So what we were proposing is a kind of staged rollout with smaller contracts, of where if you were working with a like an SME and a contract of say £30,000, to make it kind of relevant to the size of business that might be bidding, that perhaps we're asking for a CRP that just looks at scope 1 emissions, and then as the contract started to get bigger, you're at 50,000, you might be asking for one that looked at scope 1 and scope 2, right up to sort of a CRP that's been verified with like an EMS system or something like that. So you've got this staged approach to it, which will hopefully bring the private sector on the same journey with us. So we're developing that kind of that knowledge, those awareness and those skills in the private sector through then our public tenders. And that might be my last slide. I can't remember. Oh, no, sorry, it's not. But it's just a couple of points overview that it was drawn from international good practice. So like the Irish one, we used the UN. The UN guidance, we've got EU guidance in there as well. So from Eco by Vienna, things that RAP Cymru have made as well as then guidance from WPPN 0621 and 1221 as well. That it's designed to be flexible, so councils will be able to download it and put their own procurement thresholds into it. And as we're being made aware of new resources, then it is kind of being added to all the time as we're finding out about what's going on. And then kind of next steps for this. So we've done like an initial training session. So the toolkit and report were launched in the middle of March. And we did some training sessions to go alongside that as well. And our next step now is to kind of touch base again with councils in a couple of months to see how it's working, how is it being embedded, any gaps, any challenges, any issues, as we try and think about the next way to kind of support councils with using the toolkit and the resources. And that's it. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Jenny. Thank you very much for taking us through that. I'm going to, Warren's already popped up. I was going to say, I was going to ask Warren Smith to pop up. Warren is also part of the key delivery team and very much involved in the procurement and commercial space. So I've asked him to join us for our Q&A session today. Just a quick reminder that you can put any questions you have into the Q&A box and we can pick them up from there. So please do drop them in. It would be good to know what it is you'd like to find out more about whilst we have Olga and Jenny and Warren here. A quick observation for me, I suppose, while we do that, and before I sort of hand over, I know Warren has a couple of questions and thoughts as well, is around some of that measurement. And you kind of touched on it at the end of your session there, Jenny, about going back to councils in a couple of months, finding out what's working, what more is needed to support that. Any other thoughts? And Olga, I suppose if there's anything you've done in Ireland as well about how you understand the impact of this support that you're putting out there and what the next stages are likely to be, although I do recognise that for both of these, they're quite new.
Yeah, definitely. I in Ireland, you know, that's a jump we need to make. So at the moment, we actually only have government departments, so it's a small part of the public sector reporting on green public procurement at all, and they're reporting on contracts and like number and value of contracts that included green public criteria, procurement criteria, or didn't, so that we can, you know, then we get a proportion from that. I suppose this is in line with what the UN looks for in relation to one of the Sustainable Development Goals, but it doesn't tell us about impact at all. It doesn't even tell us, I suppose, what aspect of green, you know, whether it's in relation to emissions or what it might be. In the European Union, their forms relating to procurement are being updated, and we're looking into whether we can make use of this. So there may be more information included at the time of the contract award in those forms in relation to green public procurement, and there are questions, there are options for saying whether it was, you know, reduces emissions or whether it's some circular economy. That still won't give us, you know, any figures on emissions reductions, etc. So yeah, we have a lot to work out and a long way to go.
It is, and I think one of you mentioned, I think it might have been you, Jenny, around the sort of leadership and behaviour shift as well that this is supporting. And I suppose for both of you, this is part of that shift, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, we know there's a lot being done by individual contracting authorities who are trying to measure what they're doing. And you know, the more I mentioned that we held a Go Green conference last year, and we some of these contracting authorities speaking about what they were doing. So the more different bodies hear about what others are doing and what can be done, and I suppose lose some of the fear. You know, the more we would hope to see the effect spiraling, that more and more will be happy to firstly use green public procurement, but then you know, see the advantages and talk about it, and I suppose tell us about their difficulties in recording as well, and we can use all this information.
Yeah, get that. I'm going to bring you in, Warren, with a couple of questions that have just come up. That's a nice segue into what Keed's doing in this space as well. So one of them is a question for Keed. So for us, sorry, I put my glasses on, it's easier to read. Will these good practices, both Ireland and WLGA, be signposted from the Keed portal so that we know where to go and find them at a later date?
Absolutely. I think, and firstly, thank you, Olga and Jenny. I think the core purpose of Cydrannu is to hear what other organisations in any country are doing to address this complex area and ever-changing area. And so I think it's absolutely fundamental that we provide a platform and opportunities to hear of what people are doing, the lessons that you're learning, so that we can avoid unnecessary duplication, we can learn from each other. So just another heartfelt words of thanks for your contributions today. So in order to answer the question, absolutely, I think the whole purpose is that we can signpost. Our bias naturally towards curation is the approach that we're taking for Keed. Jenny, you mentioned in your presentation that there is a a plethora of information out there. We don't want to add more information into an already busy space. We want to identify the best and most useful resources and do the hard work to make it as simple as possible for public sector organisations, and particularly in our case, initially the procurement and commercial community, to find that so that they can practically know what to do on a day-to-day basis. So examples like you've shared today are absolutely critical for that. So yeah, that's absolutely the approach.
And there's one other question around sharing, which fits nicely with what you were saying there, Warren, and maybe Jenny, you could have a first answer this one. It's a practicality, I suppose. It says, can the tools be used by other countries or sectors? Are there any barriers to this? So I suppose what you've got there at WLGA?
No barriers that I'm aware of. We publish all of our resources, and our reports are available online for anybody to make use of. I guess when you say countries and barriers, it might just be, I'm not a procurement professional, so it might just be worth checking that aligns with procurement policy in your country. But otherwise, I'd say no, it's out there and it's publicly available for anybody to use and have a look at. So please do.
Thank you. And Olga, I suppose that the countries question comes into particular, I suppose, with some of the work you've been doing. So interesting thoughts you have on that.
Yeah, so the tool I was talking about is publicly available. So I would encourage people to have a look. And I would say it can be used with the caveat that, you need to check that, is this appropriate for your market conditions? So as I said, these are based on European Union Green Public Procurement criteria, and the EU encourages member states to adapt them for their own market conditions and legislation and so on, which is what happened in Ireland. So, there may be some that are more or less appropriate in another jurisdiction. So just check that. But otherwise, definitely to get ideas. So yeah, it's useful. In fact, the original inspiration for it was having a look at the Dutch Sustainable Public Procurement search tool. And I talked to them and they were really helpful also. And I talked to the Swedes who have something similar. And in fact, now it's all the rage. And since we produced this, Norway has produced one, France has an excellent site, and the UN are developing or have developed something for their own, UN bodies. And I think there are others. So I think it's really useful to look at those from different countries.
And I think it is really important. And Warren, I know that you've been doing a lot of work looking at what's happening internationally and how we can adapt that and feed it into the work that we're doing here in Keed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it just goes back to the point of everybody in all sectors are facing the challenge of dealing with the climate emergency. And so the importance of looking across organizational boundaries, looking for opportunities to collaborate and to reuse and share is absolutely critical for that. And it was on you preempted one of my questions, Victoria. So, but it was around but it's perfectly set me up. So that's good, around like the importance of measurement and continuous improvement. So, and I know, as we said, that the tools that have been presented today are in their relative infancy in terms of. Olga, yours was launched in, well, not even 6 months ago, I think now. So, I think I'm quite keen to understand like your plans for engaging with both perhaps the bidders who have been on the receiving end of this, both successful and unsuccessful, and seeing how their feedback can contribute to the continuous development of your own tooling, as well as obviously on the buy side as well. So. If there are, you mentioned this is predominantly for the central government, but any interest from, say, the local government organisations in Ireland, and just understanding your kind of engagement plans on those fronts would be useful.
I suppose during the development we got obviously a small subsection, but we tried to get diverse public buyers involved in the development of the tool and make sure it worked for all of them. And sometimes what for example, somebody working in a central procurement body developing a new framework, what they would what would be the ideal for them is not necessarily what a procurement practitioner, a procurement officer in a small public body, what the ideal for them is. So, so we had like workshops and discussions, and, to some extent there has to be a compromise then. But I think that worked quite well. As I said, it's not even 6 months yet. I intend to go back to those who were involved at that stage, 6 months in about, to kind of see, are they using it for a start, and then get more feedback. We get some feedback. I would like to encourage more feedback. One thing that having the collaboration with the Department of the Environment has helped is that it's been included in the latest version of the Climate Action Plan, for example, and the public sector climate action mandate. So this is going to get a lot more publicity. We are seeing, just this week, even one of the local authorities, their climate action plan refers to it. There was a large, the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, they held a large energy conference a while ago, and one or two of the public bodies that talked about what they're doing to reduce energy use mentioned it. So, but still, to get a really good idea across all public bodies is going to be tricky. But it's something the EPA, for example, they in the reporting now to the EPA on green public procurement, there's a question about awareness and use of the tools. So it will take a bit of time.
Thank you, Olga. And I think you both mentioned it about the importance of these kind of tools being in the open. And available for anybody to use, but also the importance of context and adaptability, and not assuming these are one-size-fits-all approaches. It's saying, well, we've started something new here. It's different. We're seeing how it works in our context, but I think the importance of honest and open sharing of the lessons learned is also really, really critical. And I think great to see the action plan that you mentioned, Olga, being an annual thing that's updated. I mean, that's because, like I said, everything's moving quite quickly in this space, and time is passing at an ever increasing rate. It feels towards the 2030 goals, and everybody's obviously looking beyond that. But I think that's really key. And I suppose if I was to ask kind of a concluding question to both you, Jenny, and Olga, is like, this is a complex area. It is ever evolving. It does require all stakeholders and us as individuals, as citizens of the planet, to play a role in this. So where do you start? Where would you advise any organizations who are kind of scratching their head thinking we need to get on this journey? Where would you advise them to start, and what should be the first kind of steps that they should take?
Jenny, do you want to pick up first?
Yeah, brilliant. In terms of procurement, like where we'd want to start?
Potentially, yeah. Or but even more broadly on like how do we address the climate emergency, and what action can I take as an individual, as an organisation? But yeah, we can focus it on procurement.
Good question, otherwise.
So I think focusing on procurement, I think probably the first place that I would recommend people to start when they're thinking about purchasing is to start with the sustainable procurement hierarchy that RAP developed. So that very first question of, is this something that needs to be purchased at all? Is it something that we can remake or be reused? And then if it is something that we have to purchase, then to refer to the guidance that's in the toolkit to make sure that we're doing that in the most sustainable and carbon-friendly way. So yeah, just following that sort of ethical and sustainable purchasing thought process is starting right at the beginning, because I think we do sometimes have a sort of a tendency to kind of just like keep going as we have been doing, that we might want to keep that service going in the same way or purchase the same thing that we've had before. But I think in the climate emergency that we're in and the 6.5 years that we've got to reach net zero, then we need to stop doing that, go right back to that early thinking and make sure that we're making sustainable and carbon friendly decisions right from the start.
It's a shift of mindset thing that's so important, isn't it? Not, and going back to where we started, not just in procurement, across everything we're doing and decisions we're taking.
Yeah.
Olga, any thoughts?
I'd agree with everything Jenny's just said there now. And also Jenny talked about, you know, the fact that there is a lot of information out there, and I suppose that's something also that I've been looking at, the amount of information that's out there, and even the tool that I talked about, you know, those criteria were already published. But sometimes it takes a new tool to get awareness. So yeah, I mean, I suppose for an organisation, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. That there is very good guidance, and it does start with, do we need this stuff? But even before that, I think it does start with, I suppose, you know, beyond procurement. If an organisation has a sustainable strategy and decides that everything we're going to do is sustainable, then that should flow through. And we have seen some very good examples of that from individual, you know, universities and individual local authorities, for example, and some other bodies as well, where they have a very good sustainability strategy, which includes mapping out emissions, which shows them, you know, the impact of procurement within that, on emissions, and then other areas of the environment as well, and ethics and so on. So, you know, if you have that, and then it becomes the norm in the organisation that everything we do is sustainable, then you don't have the problem that I think some procurement practitioners face, where they think, well, what if this is more expensive, or what you know, is this is this legal? You know, it's just, you've made that decision already. That decision has been made at the highest level already, so it becomes the norm. So I think that's really important.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to the Q&A because we've got a few questions come in on here. There's one anonymous one, a bit of a challenge to you, Howard, about whether you can find links quickly and whether we can share them within this webinar. But if you can't, don't worry, because we'll get them shared afterwards. And it's just the question saying that, you know, it'd be good to get all of the tools mentioned by Olga signposted. Warren's point about doing the hard work for us to identify the golden nuggets is very relevant, and absolutely, totally agree. If we can get some of those links, we'll share them in here now. But if not, we will share them afterwards via the social media and on our website linked into this webinar as well. We've got a question from Hugh Griffiths. Last time we tried to do this, we couldn't get the mics unmuted to allow people to ask the questions themselves, but we think we've nailed it this time. So Hugh, we're going to allow you to speak via a click that Chris is just doing over there. And if you would like to, you should now be able to unmute yourself and ask that question, because it's always nice to hear some other voices.
Can you hear me?
We can indeed. Brilliant.
Spot on. Yeah, just I suppose one of the challenging things that we find, I think, is there's different things that we can try and include in our procurement, but maybe a lot of our market isn't ready to sort of respond to sort of those sort of questions or sort of challenges. So, you know, we probably, you know, suggested to maybe make it a pass-fail criteria that suppliers have a carbon reduction plan. Despite that's a good ambition, I think a lot of our markets probably wouldn't be ready to actually meet that level of challenge, and we might see just as not being able to get the service we need. So what we might go down the route of, and I think when the sustainability toolkit got released, they sort of agreed, if you think the market isn't quite there yet, you maybe make it a contract condition that by the end of the first year of the contract that they have a carbon reduction plan, rather than it being a pass-fail, and these are different things. So I was just thinking, I'm not really aware of exactly what support there is out there right now for different businesses to try and get these carbon reduction plans and sort of measures and everything else set up. I know there's, you know, a Business Wales contract that's in the process of being renewed, but what exactly that'll have in there in terms of support around this, I don't know yet. But is that the way that I think Welsh Government are thinking? Is everything going to be maybe funneled towards Business Wales, or is there something else the group is aware of that we think businesses should really take advantage of this or this? I know that's a bit more long-winded than my question.
That's all good. Thank you, Hugh. I mean, I know this is specifically aimed at what's available to us here in Wales at the moment. I'm going to throw this at you, Warren, that you may or may not have the answer to, and whether Jenny has any thoughts on it as well. Otherwise, that's one we can definitely go and do some digging in the background about. But Warren.
Yeah, it's a great question. And so up until now, the focus for Keed has been on really predominantly the demand side of procurement, so the public sector, but we're acutely aware of the importance of bringing in the needs and the voices of both the private and the social enterprise sectors within Wales. And so again, back to the point around our bias towards curation and signposting to existing initiatives or guidance or training or support, whatever that might be, which can help all users to navigate this complex space. So keep your eyes peeled for our plans as we move forward with Keed on areas where we could bring that into the material that we'll be presenting. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw on one of Jenny's slides around support, and also we know that the Future Generations Commissioner's Office are also looking at kind of private sector readiness and particularly SMEs for meeting the wellbeing goals as well. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled, keep your ears open, eyes peeled. That's it.
Thank you, Jenny. Did you have any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, just a few bits to add. And yeah, Hugh, I think that's sort of the kind of approach that we are suggesting, was that, if we think, it being relevant to the contract and the sort of the goods and services that we are procuring, of making it perhaps like a condition of tender, sort of a condition of contract, that they produce a carbon reduction plan. And it was one of the key pieces of feedback that we had from our members. So we have produced a really short guide for SMEs on developing carbon reduction plans, which is on the website as well. And again, just signposting to different links. So the Crown Commercial Service run weekly sessions for SMEs on producing carbon reduction plans. And they also have online free readily available templates that you can download with some guidance on how to calculate sort of the emissions from your energy use. So there is some guidance out there, but I think and as part of it, we connected with Business Wales to find out like sort of what support might be available through them in terms of helping businesses produce CRPs as well. So there is some support available. It's just about, I think our next stage now is thinking about, are those skills in the private sector where we're asking for them, and then how do we get that message out? How do we get these resources? How do we make sure that they know about these training sessions? And when they see that question as a pathway, they don't go, oh God, I don't have that, because there's support and resources and templates out there that we can make sure that they do have that.
Thank you, Jenny.
That's I have seen that as part of the toolkit as well. Like you said, there is templates and there is training from Crown Commercial Services and these sorts of things. But yeah, hopefully there will be a little bit more maybe hand holding from Business Wales as well, because unfortunately a lot of the businesses that we deal with, they definitely need hand holding, and they sometimes need dragging them to make use of this, please, go to this session, get that support. And even then some businesses do it kicking and screaming a little bit, so it almost needs someone to, we don't want them to do it for we don't want, it's not realistic someone will do it for them, because but almost really, there needs, I think, to be, I think, like I said, there's a lot of information out there, but I think that resource to sit down with the business and really take them through it, and more than just give them a few templates and some referrals. I think that's probably something that ideally needs to be looked at. I think that there needs to be resource there, especially for like small businesses. But
thank you, Hugh. I can see Warren, you've got your hand up. Did you want to add into that?
Yeah, I think this sounds and really resonates with one of the highest areas that the community expressed a need for support guidance on was around contract management and the role of contract management and proactive relationship management through the course of contract delivery, where I think that helping both organisations in terms of the buying organisation and the supply organisation to work towards a set of goals that helps to increase capability, capacity and understanding of the areas where they can have the most impact, which reduces the environmental emissions as well as other social benefits. I think is also really, really key. So it's not a it has to be an active set of actions that go towards achieving those kind of goals, better outcomes and impacts that can be monitored, and for that monitoring and evaluation to then feed into the continuous improvement. So I think it's definitely hearing the question and the kind of comments raised today just for me reinforces the importance of that stage of the commercial life cycle and the support that's needed on both sides of the procurement picture, really. So no, thanks for that.
Thank you, Warren, and thank you, Hugh, for your question and for asking it as well. Anghenion just pointed out to me that most of the links are actually already shared in the chat, so I hadn't been keeping an eye on the chat, so I didn't realise they were already in there, but thank you, Anghenion, for putting that there. We had an anonymous question about where SMEs can get advice on all of this, and I think we've covered off a lot of that through the back of that last question, but whoever asked that meant something different or needed a bit more clarification, please do ask again. We've got a question from Sarah Phillips. Sarah, again, we can allow you to speak if you would like to. Please don't feel obliged, but you should be free to speak now if you'd like to ask the question yourself.
Yes, thank you, Victoria. I just asked really around the Welsh Government sustainability risk assessments that have been updated and made available recently. I haven't really heard a great deal about how to use these and apply them.
Thank you. That's probably one for Jenny and Warren if they have a view on at the moment. Anyone want to go first? No.
No, I don't mind. Yeah, so we have mentioned the sustainable risk assessment within the guidance on the toolkit. That is very much part of kind of that sustainable procurement kind of like route. So what sort of the sustainable, like you say, it's in like review, I think, at the moment, isn't it? That kind of comes as part of the early kind of decision making and specification writing, and then with the toolkit sort of helping support that. So they're kind of both pieces of the same puzzle, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. Warren, any?
Just to add, I think we can feed that back to our Welsh Government stakeholders. I'm pretty sure I heard it mentioned very recently, but my memory of exactly in what context that was, I think I'll be misrepresenting it if I tried to. So I think if we can get some feedback, we can then either encourage some kind of update on it being provided through Keed, or we can cover it in the next Keed running session or something. But we can certainly, ask that question back to our key stakeholders in the Welsh Government.
Yes, because I think they've put a lot of work into that, and I think they were going to put some training online, but I don't think I've seen anything as yet. So I just think they've come up with quite detailed tools that would take quite a lot of time to complete and would be very useful, but I'm just not sure how they're being applied, really.
Thank you. I've just seen a note here from Dave Nicholson, who is listening in as well, saying can't speak again. The sustainability risk assessment is also going into a new digital tool called the policy mapping tool that is currently being built. The Keed community will be used to test the tool when a version to test is available. So it's a bit of an update there as well.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got to 1 minute to 2, so I am going to call it a day there. Thank you very much. We just popped it on the screen. We do have a user testing group for Keed that we're always looking for people from the community who would be happy to get involved and be part of that. It's not a massive drain on your resources. Sometimes it's just answering a few questions on an email. There's some sessions that are done online, but if you think you'd like to get involved, you can scan that or go onto the keed.cymru, our website, and you join that way. So we'd encourage you you to do so. So that just leaves me to thank Olga, Jenny and Warren very much indeed for being involved and giving up your time today. As Warren said, this is absolutely core to what we want Keed to be doing, how we share and how we learn from each other. So thank you for being part of this session today. As we've said, we have recorded this and we'll make this session available on our website and share through our socials and the groups that we already have available. So please feel free to listen again if you want to, or share it on with colleagues and others who may be interested. So thank you all very much for joining us today and hope to see you at the next session.